The sea should have roared that morning. But instead, it held its breath. A mirror of blue steel stretched from Sicily to the edge of the world, so still that even the gulls fell silent. It was the kind of silence that comes before history changes its course. Beneath those calm waters, destiny was gathering. Oz waited. Sails trembled. And somewhere beyond the horizon, an empire dared to do the impossible. The year, 256 BC. For centuries, the Mediterranean had been the board in which Gids played their game of empires. To the north Rome, a land power born of iron and discipline, young, relentless, hungry for glory. To the south Carthage, the ocean's chosen child, heir to the Phoenicians, master of trade winds on Bryn's rams. The world knew its roles. Rome ruled the land. Carthage ruled the sea. But that year, Rome broke the script. They built a navy out of nothing, hundreds of ships, crafted by men who had never set foot in a deck. Farmers, blacksmiths, engineers suddenly turned sailors. No one believed they could stand against Carthage fleets. But belief was never Rome's weapon. Their weapon was will. And in that morning, their will was forged into timber and iron, ready to meet the ocean and its own terms. What followed was not a battle, it was a revolution. An ancient D-Day, a storm of men on machines that would decide who ruled the heart of the world. In a single day, Rome would gamble everything, its army, its future, its destiny, in the waves it had never known. Because sometimes, history doesn't belong to the strongest empire. It belongs to the wind mad enough to believe it can change the rules. This is Ecnomus, the day the land learned to conquer the sea. If stories like this set your heart racing, if you love the moments when courage rewrites history, then stay with us. Like, subscribe, and let's sail into the storm together. Before the thunder of Oz and the crash of Bryn's, there was a rivalry, ancient, bitter, inevitable. The Mediterranean in the 3rd century BC was more than a sea. It was the Silicon Valley of the ancient world, the engine of trade, culture, and power. Whoever ruled it, ruled civilization. And one side stood Carthage, the great merchant empire of North Africa. Its harbors teemed with ships from every corner of the known world: Spain, Egypt, Greece. Its people were sailors by birth, traders by instinct, and its navy, the most advanced on earth. Generations of Phoenician craftsmanship had made them masters of the sea, sleek ships of cedar, Bryn's tipped rams that could shatter hulls like glass, captains who could read the wind as easily as a man reads a map. And in the other shore stood Rome, the ambitious republic, still finding its place among the powers of the world. Rome had no ports worth naming, no naval tradition, no experienced marinas. Its strength was in land, in its legions, in its roads, in its relentless discipline. For 10 years they had bled each other across the island of Sicily, the gateway to the western Mediterranean. Every Roman victory in land was erased by Carthaginian dominance at sea. Each time the legions advanced, Carthaginian ships would arrive with new armies, new supplies, new hope. It was like fighting a shadow that could not be cornered. And then, in the Senate halls of Rome, a realization dawned, cold and strategic. As long as Carthage ruled the sea, Rome could never win the war. So they decided to do the unthinkable: invade Africa itself. But first, they needed to cross the sea. And to cross the sea, they needed a navy. Not to token fleet, but hundreds of warships to match the might of Carthage. For any other people, that would have been a dream too foolish to speak aloud. For the Romans, it became an order. In less than 2 months, Rome built over 300 quinquiremes, massive war galleys, each with 5 rows of oars, bristling with soldiers and ambition. According to the historian Polybius, they copied a single captured Carthaginian ship, reverse-engineered it, and multiplied it hundreds of times, the world's first act of industrial imitation. It was an engineering miracle, or madness. Farmers became shipbuilders. Soldiers became oarsmen. They learned the rhythm of rowing like they had once learned the rhythm of marching. They transformed the ocean, unpredictable, fluid, untamable, into a new kind of battlefield. And somewhere between arrogance and genius, Rome turned innovation into a weapon. Carthage watched, confident, even amused. No republic of armadas could threaten the kings of the sea, or so they thought. But history has a way of humbling certainty. Because the Romans were not trying to become sailors. They were trying to turn the sea into land, to bring the order of their legions to the case of the waves. What they created next would shake the ancient world, a wooden bridge of iron on death that would transform how wars were fought for centuries to come. At dawn, the harbour of Sicily thundered with sound, the groan of wood, the chant of oarsmen, the clatter of armor. 2 Roman consuls, Marcus Atilius Regulus and Lucius Manlius Vulso, stood in the decks of their flagships, watching 300 war galleys stretch across the water like an iron horizon. Behind them, the air was thick with the smell of tar, sweat, and destiny. For the first time in history, Rome had a navy. Not a fleet of sailors, but an army that could float. Each ship carried legionaries instead of marinas. Each deck bristled with shields on spears. Each heartbeat drummed to military cadence did across the sea. Carthage responded in kind. Their admirals, Hamilcar and Hanno, gathered more than 350 ships, manned by men who had spent their lives in the waves. Their confidence was centuries old. Their arrogance, just as ancient. To them, Rome's ships were lumbering beasts, unfit for the dance of the sea. And yet, Rome brought something Carthage had never seen, a machine born of desperation and genius. It was called the Corvus, a rotating bridge of wood and iron, 12 meters long, mounted in the prow of each ship. At its tip hung a heavy spike, shaped like a claw. When dropped, it would bite into an enemy deck, locking the 2 ships together. To the Carthaginians, naval combat meant ramming on maneuver. To the Romans, it now meant boarding, turning sea duels into land battles in water. It was, in a sense, Rome's aircraft carrier moment, the invention that rewrote the rulebook of war. But genius never comes without doubt. Many Roman officers feared the Corvus would make their ships too heavy, too slow, too vulnerable to wind. Yet for Regulus, it was worth the risk. He didn't want to outmaneuver Carthage. He wanted to break them, to drag them into the win arena. Rome never lost close combat. In spring of 256 BC, the fleets finally moved. From the cliffs above the Sicilian coast, fishermen watched the sea turn to iron. The sun rose over 1,000 sails, their reflections flickering like blades of light. The Romans advanced in an arrow formation, a massive wedge cutting toward the horizon. At its tip, the 2 consuls led the charge. Behind them, slower transport ships followed, carrying horses, supplies, and the fragile dream of invading Africa. In the opposite side, the Carthaginians spread their wings wide, a formation built for speed and deception. Hamilcar planned a classic trap feign retreat, lure the Romans forward, and crush them from both sides, a maneuver that would, decades later, make his son Hannibal famous at Cani. But in this day, the father would learn a cruel truth. Not every plan survives first contact with innovation. The wind shifted. The oars struck rhythm. Drums pounded from ship to ship, echoing across the gulf like thunder. From afar, it must have looked like 2 living creatures, leviathans of wood and bronze, charging toward each other. Every man aboard knew that once the fleets collided, there would be no escape. The sea was no longer a path. It was a trap of fate. Some prayed to Neptune, others whispered the names of wives and sons. But all of them, Roman and Carthaginian alike, knew they were about to enter something larger than war. The moment when invention meets tradition, when courage meets case. The horizon darkened with sails. The wind roared and somewhere between the crash of waves and the beating of drums, the world held its breath. The morning sun rose over Cape Ecnomus, sharp and white, cutting through a mist heavy with tension. Below, 2 oceans of men faced each other, their ships like living beasts clawing at the waves. In that silence before the first strike, even the wind seemed afraid to breathe. Then came the sound. Drums. Low, deep, relentless, the heartbeat of empires. In the Carthaginian side, oars dipped into the sea in perfect rhythm. The ships glided forward like predators, bronze rams glinting under the light. Hamilcar gave the signal. The center began its slow, deliberate retreat, just as planned, to draw the Romans out, to stretch their line, to make them vulnerable. It was a move born of experience, the same logic that had ruled the seas for centuries. But across the water, Rome was rewriting that logic. Regulus stood at the prow of his flagship, the Corvus looming above him like the arm of fate. The Roman wedge cut forward, oars pounding like thunder. As the first Carthaginian ram struck, the sea exploded in foam on splinters. The sky filled with shouts, Latin and Punic, fear on fury. The air smelled of pitch, salt, on burning wood. Then, with a single motion, Regulus raised his arm, on the world changed. The Corvus dripped. The iron claw slammed down into a Carthaginian deck, biting deep into wood on bone. A chain of screams followed as the two ships locked together. And then, the unimaginable, the Romans charged across the bridge. For the first time in history, naval combat became hand-to-hand. Shields clashed, swords sang, blood met saltwater. Carthaginian mariners, trained for speed and maneuver, found themselves trapped in the Romans' domain, the domain of discipline and grit. Their decks, once graceful arenas of movement, became killing grounds of case. Polybius wrote that within minutes, the center of the Carthaginian line began to buckle. Where there should have been retreat, there was confusion. Where there should have been order, there was panic. Smoke signals blurred. Orders vanished in the wind. The sea, once Carthage's ally, turned against her. From above, it must have looked like a mosaic of madness. Ships colliding, oars snapping, men screaming. The Romans fought as if the planks beneath them were solid earth. Each bridge they dropped became a new front, each captured ship a new fortress. And through it all, Regulus's voice cut through the storm. Advance. But victory has a cost. As the Roman vanguard pressed forward, their formation stretched dangerously thin. Behind them, the slow transport ships, laden with supplies, horses on hook, drifted unguarded. Hanno saw it. From the Carthaginian right flank, he turned his ships hard, slicing through the waves like daggers. He could end it here, destroy the transports, cripple Rome's invasion before it began. He charged. The sea roared. The wind screamed. And for a moment, it seemed the old masters of the ocean would reclaim their throne. But the Romans, desperate, defiant, adopted once more. They cut loose the ropes, tying them to the transports and maneuvered into the shallows, where Carthage's sleek ships could knit fillow. There, in the churning surf, they formed a wall of prows, iron and resolve. When the Carthaginian ships rammed forward, the Corvus fell again and again, and again. Every clash was a heartbeat, every bridge a gamble between life and death. The sea became a graveyard of heroes. Hours passed. The water turned red. The air shook with the sound of splintering wood and the cries of dying men. Smoke rolled across the horizon like thunderclouds. Even the Gids, it seemed, had turned their faces away. And yet, in that case, discipline endured. That was Rome's secret: knit luck, knit numbers, but the unbreakable rhythm of men who refused to yield. Where Carthage fought with instinct, Rome fought with system. Where Carthage sought movement, Rome created structure. And structure even amid destruction. Conquer case did as the sun began to sink. Hamilcar's grand formation dissolved. His center shattered. His wings were isolated. The trap he had set was closing, but in himself the Roman ships, botted but relentless, turned with the wind and struck back. The hunters became the hunted. One by one, the Carthaginian ships were boarded, captured, or sunk. Bronze rams that had once broken enemy hulls now lay twisted beneath the waves. By nightfall, the water around Ecnomus was choked with debris: masts, oars, biddies. 30,000 Carthaginians were dead or captured. 64 ships taken. Rome lost 24. But statistics can't measure what happened that day. A nation that had feared the sea had conquered it. A people of plows on roads had turned into masters of wind on wave. The Gids of the ocean had been overthrown by engineers on soldiers. That day, Rome learned something that would echo for centuries. That innovation can break destiny. That the greatest victories are born not of experience, but of adaptation. And in that lesson, the seeds of empire were sown. By sunset, the Mediterranean had fallen silent again. The drums had stopped. The shouting was gone. Only the waves remained, whispering over the wreckage of empires. Broken masts drifted like the bones of giants. Oars floated aimlessly, stripped of direction. And among them, the dead, Romans and Carthaginians alike, equal now beneath the same indifferent sea. From the cliffs, the smoke rose in dark spirals, reaching toward a sky that had seen too much. Ecnomus was not just a victory. It was a transformation. Rome had crossed a line that no nation had dared before, from land to sea, from tradition to invention, from fear to dominance. They had taken the element that once limited them and made it their own. The Corvus, their strange wooden bridge, would soon be abandoned, too heavy, too unstable for long voyages. But the idea it represented would live forever, that no disadvantage is permanent, no power eternal, no frontier unconquerable. For Carthage, the loss was more than ships or soldiers. It was the shattering of certainty, the realization that their monopoly in the sea could be broken. For Rome, it was proof of something deeper, that courage could be engineered, that determination could become a form of technology. In that sense, Ecnomus was not merely a battle, it was a rehearsal for empire. From those waters rose a republic that would one day call itself the ruler of the world. And centuries later, when people speak of innovation, of audacity, of impossible ambition, they are, in some way, still speaking of that day, the day the land conquered the sea. If you believe that courage can change the course of history, that innovation can rise from desperation, and that even the smallest nation can stand against an empire, then this story was written for you, because history is not made by the powerful. It's made by those who refuse to accept their limits. Join us on journey deeper into the forgotten battles that shaped our world. Subscribe and keep the fire of history alive, one story at a time.